Welcome. Shall we dive deep here? This is an episode that is probably a long time in coming, and I haven't done as many personal ones on this show recently because I've been struggling with exactly what we're going to talk about here. And I think it might be something that a lot of you are also experiencing. Do you ever feel like no matter how much you do, it is never enough? You are constantly hustling, and this idea of calm, the calm that you're craving, it just feels very out of reach. You feel like you are always in survival mode. This episode is about how to shift that. Go into kind of the psychology of survival mode. We'll talk about how do you know if you're in survival mode, actions you're doing which are making you hustle more and you might not even realize it. All of that stuff is going to be in here. We're going to talk about too how your nervous system is affected, how you can break free from all of that, and then 3 actions to finding inner peace. So all of that is here in the episode, but I wanna start with an experience to frame it. If it's your first time listening, or maybe you haven't heard many of my solo episodes, you might not know that one of the biggest things I have struggled with is depression throughout my life, and it's not one of those mild ones, let's say. It was extremely debilitating, and it's also something that has run in my family. I remember, starting right on the vulnerability piece here. I remember growing up and seeing, my mom would work late night shifts as a licensed practical nurse, and she'd come home. And of course, she was tired from that, but also she was really struggling emotionally and with this genetic predisposition for depression. So she would spend hours just lying on the couch sometimes or just not being super responsive and not enjoying life and not calm and always in hustle mode. And for those of you that have felt this, you understand. For those of you that have not, it's just a really difficult thing to explain. The best I can present it as is all of us have our own mountains to climb. But when you're dealing with a lot of this mental load and frustration and overwhelm, it's like you also have a bunch of rocks in your backpack. So you have to pause more. You have to go back more. It feels harder to do things which might be easier to someone else. And the reason why I'm starting on such a serious note and why I'm talking about this is because so much of this is linked to our desire to hustle and perform. Because when we're constantly hustling, even if you don't struggle with depression, the reality is that being in hustle mode, being constantly on is a way for you to distract yourself. And it's also this kind of false promise of if I achieve XYZ eventually, then I will be calm, then I will be happy, then I can escape these emotions. And it took me so long to realize that it doesn't work that way. So the next time that you're wondering why basic things feel so hard, or you feel like you have to work twice as hard as someone else and you're still falling behind, I want you to remember this stuff. And if you love someone in your life who is experiencing this and you're seeing it, please share this episode. What we want to do is see how can you move from survival mode and the doing, which hides the things in your life that are good or that you could improve or enjoy. And the psychology of this comes down to this quote, which will forever stick in my mind. Everything you have is because of a habit of thought or behavior. Everything you don't have is also because of a habit of a thought or behavior. It is the stuff you are repeatedly doing that is increasing or decreasing the stress in your life. Now, this is where we want to check. How do you know if you're in survival mode? How do you know if you're stuck in survival mode? I'm going to give you 10 different behaviors that you are probably going through that you don't even realize that are elevating your stress and that are stopping you from actually achieving because you are stuck in the doing. Biggest one for most people, constantly checking your phone. The need to stay connected, it creates this illusion of productivity for us, but is putting you in a reactive state. If you ever have been the person that is on the other side of waiting for someone to respond on WhatsApp or a text message and you see those three little dots like flashing again and again, and someone doesn't respond, you are in a reactive state. You are in high stress level waiting for that response. Related to this, feeling guilty when you're not productive. You have this sense of guilt, this nagging sense of guilt if you're not doing something. And it might not even be something for your work or your business. It could just be, I need to clean or I need to do XYZ. Because if I'm not, then something's wrong or I'm lazy or whatever it is that you tell yourself. Three was me a lot. Overscheduling yourself. Constantly saying yes to stuff. You feel like it's a badge of honor that you are so busy. And maybe it's socially or maybe it's with work. But the thing is, no matter why you're doing it, it's a recipe for burnout. Overscheduling is overtaxing your nervous system. And we'll talk about how that relates in a little bit here. For multitasking, huge thing of mine. I used to think that I was amazing for this, that I would have 20 tabs open at a time and I was just always could keep track of everything. But it's not true. I wasn't more efficient. I was more stressed and I was less focused. That's what multitasking does to you. Number five, this is a huge thing that I struggled with, which is being addicted to achievement. You are defining your self worth by your accomplishments, constantly setting new goals, and you never take time to celebrate what you've already achieved. To this day, this is something that I struggle with. It is very hard for me to not go on to the next thing. It takes pretty much all my self control to rest and pause. Six, difficulty sleeping or relaxing, which can be a symptom of what we've already mentioned, but you have these to-do lists racing in your mind. You're always planning for the future. That makes it hard for you to rest because you are constantly, even when you're supposed to be letting that mind just blank out and be, you are doing. Seven, fear of missing out. So this is an interesting one because most people don't think about this as a reason why they are in survival mode or why they're stressed out. You feel compelled to say yes to everything, everyone, social events, work opportunities, personal commitments, for the fear that you will miss on something important, which means you never have time for yourself and you never rest. Comparing yourself to others, number eight. You constantly measure your progress or your success against others. This makes it feel like you are never doing enough and you're never going far enough. And I will say to you, because it has been my experience forever, that you will always feel this way if that's how you think. You cannot escape the fact that someone will always be doing better. And the really wild thing about this, just as an aside, because I think this will help you tone down the comparison, is if you look back to goals you had that don't matter anymore. Think about something that you maybe you achieved or maybe you didn't, but you don't really care about that goal, but at one point you did. And think about who you compared yourself to and how much you just studied what they did and you obsessed and you felt like, why are they getting it? And how much you don't care now. That's the attitude we need now. We need the attitude of, okay, they're doing it. That's great. I feel really glad and happy for them, or I at least feel neutral, but I am on my own journey. Number nine, running on adrenaline related to all of this. You are so used to pushing yourself through your day. I do this too. You rely on caffeine, on that adrenaline, on your willpower rather than your natural energy. And you probably have felt this way where you think, I have so much to do. I am not going to be able to do this stuff unless I have another cup of coffee or tea. Maybe it's a sign that you shouldn't be doing that much. And I recognize we have deadlines and external stuff to work with. So I understand you got to take this as a nuance. But maybe the response isn't, I need to get more caffeine so I can work harder. But maybe my body is saying it's time, or my mind is saying it's time to pause. And then number 10, neglecting self-care, also similar thing. You view taking time for yourself, whether it's resting or meditating or even just doing something you enjoy, as wasting time when you could be hustling. This is also something I always did because I always thought of self care as, my skincare routine and I do my workouts and I meditate in the morning and I do that, right? But the thing is that I am not doing always the stuff I enjoy because I'm thinking about how I could use that time instead for something else. So maybe that's you. Does it hit home? What we don't realize, and this is where we bring in the nervous system here, is that for many years, you are in this heightened state of stress. And we don't realize how much it's mentally and physically breaking us down. And I'm going to share with you a quick example of that in a moment. But I'm sure you have felt that. Because when you are constantly stressed and stuck in doing and achieving, you are in fight or flight. You are in survival mode. You are constantly on high alert to respond to some danger. And that is how overthinking and constantly doing and worst case scenarios, all of this is going to trigger that fight or flight response or freeze or fawn or whatever in the sympathetic branch of your nervous system. Because you essentially are telling your body, we have to be aware, we have to be alert. There is danger, or there's a chance we're going to lose something, or we're not going to win something. We need to be ready. And that response is only meant to be in your life for short bursts of time, not for prolonged periods of time, because it does start to break down your body. And you can notice that you have this if you feel any of these. Notice if you do restlessness, irritability. I always got that one. Trouble sleeping, or you constantly feel on edge. All of these are signals from your nervous system saying, we are doing too much. We are trying to achieve too much. And can you please calm down? I've talked about earlier in this season of this year of how I was in the middle of pivoting my business and it created this really high alert, stressful response that eventually prolonged a sickness I had where I couldn't speak for 3 months because my throat muscles were constricted. And to this day, that was in January, to this day, now in October, I still feel that when I get super stressed. It hasn't gone away. I hope it does one day, but it hasn't gone away. And it's just a very real example of how your body feels this stress. And while you might not notice in the same way that I do with my throat, I can tell you it's there. I can tell you that it happens quite frequently. And it's not nice to feel this discomfort for me, but at the same time, I think it's forcing me to respond. Because when I just felt a little agitated, or I just felt a little tired, or I couldn't sleep, I would push through. Not anymore. So let's talk about now, most importantly, how do we break free from this? How do you break free from survival mode? And I'm going to give you a really interesting example that I found. So I recently, a few months ago, decided that I really wanted to get more into drawing. It's a way for me to calm down, the nervous system, relax. So I got this book. The idea, or one of the concepts in there, is you want to shut down the critical left brain thinking. Because when you're drawing and you're using your left brain, you're going to use pre-programmed symbols. For example, I know a circle is a person's head, I'm going to use it. But in fact, when you're drawing a representation of something and you want scale and you want shades of color, etc., you cannot think about it super logically. You have to just observe. You have to shut down that left side, use your right brain. And so there's all these tools and techniques in that book on how can you shut down the left side. And one of the most interesting ones is if you're looking at a picture, let's say a picture of a chair and a plant. And most people, they will draw the outline of the chair and then draw the outline of the plant in the pot next to it. But the way that you can shut down this thinking so you can actually get the textures and the scale and the perspective is if you draw the negative space. So you're drawing the space around the chair and around the plant. And when you start to do that, you get so much richer detail and it actually looks a lot more like what you're seeing. And the way that this kind of relates back to everything that we're talking about is we need to trick our brains into stopping that overthinking, achieving, doing left brain mode, breaking those patterns of thought. We need to disrupt those routines, those habits, and we have to create the space, seeing that negative space around an object to form a new perspective. Inner peace is blocked by old mental patterns. When you can confuse the brain, you create opportunities for more inner peace. So, we want to find, and I'll share 3 actions with you today. How can you do that? How can you shut down the overthinking, overdoing, achieving left side of the brain to have more calm and to exit survival hustle mode? Pattern break. Now, like the drawing exercise that I described to you, if you can change your routine in a small way. So, with the drawing, I'm changing the way I draw by doing the negative space instead of the outline of the object. You're going to find a different way to do your normal routines. How can I slightly shift what I'm doing? Can I take a different route to work? Can I eat lunch outside? Every day, what is one tiny pattern break? If you think about it, whenever you go on vacation, one of the reasons why it feels so nice and resetting for your nervous system and why you really enjoy it is because nothing is the same routine. You are constantly doing things a little bit differently. You might eat differently. The view is different. You are going into the water in the morning instead of going to work. Like there's some very big shifts, but you can do this in your daily life with small stuff. All of these pattern breaks are forcing your mind to just step out for a moment, just to be a little different, just to stop the doing to think for a second. Counting your blessings. Everyone says, have the gratitude journal, have these 3 things. But I would invite you to take it a next step and actually think about the stuff you overlook because it's very easy to say stuff like, I feel grateful for my partner or my friends or for my job. But are there smaller things? Again, when we go on vacation, one of the best things that it does for us, or even when we travel, is you come back home and you realize, I really loved this thing. I really loved this about my home. Yes, of course, it creates a sense of abundance, but it's to break a pattern. It's to open up the calm. It's to stop the overthinking and just think for a moment, wow, this is nice. Training your brain to see more of that in your daily life. Number 3, it's about being present. And so, one of the hardest things to do that I am admittedly working on is doing nothing for 10 minutes of the day. This allows you to just be without the pressure to achieve or perform. Easiest if you do this walking or you're outside. You can also just do it sitting down and notice how hard or how easy is it for you. There was an amazing quote. We had a guest on the show, Dr. Daniel Hochman. I'll also include that link in this episode. He was talking about how one of the best indicators of someone's level of mental health is their ability to be still. And when he said that, it was like a shot to the heart because I realized that my ability to be still was not very high. And I always think about that quote when I'm thinking, okay, we need to have some of this time to do nothing. Most recently, in the last year, when I took a solo trip, this is a really good series I did, by the way, in the podcast called Monk Mode. I will link it in the show notes. But I took a month and I was traveling alone, not trying to meet people, not trying to be social, not staying in very social places, but just to be, not to achieve, not to film content, not to do anything like that, not to try to find relationships, friendships with people, but just to be. And it felt like one of the best moments of my life, and it's so funny because I didn't do anything. There's nothing that I can look at during that trip where I thought, "This is so extraordinary because I achieved," because I didn't achieve anything in that month. Not any big stuff with my business, not any big things in my personal life. I just was. And I remember individual moments of that 1 month better than things that have happened to me a couple weeks ago because I was fully present in them. I remember like taking showers in the outdoor rainwater shower, which I love. Life dream is to have a shower that's just outside with the rainwater coming down. Things like that I remember, and they meant a lot because I was in the being. So it might not make sense for you to take a month to do this. It might not be possible to do a week or even a day, but even an hour of just being. That is what is behind survival mode. It is this need to always be doing. And whether you got it from your parents, as I did, or you got it from society, from siblings, or maybe just your own need to prove yourself. It's now time to say, okay, I am never going to exit this stress and I am never going to find the fulfillment and purpose that I want if I cannot step out and have the being as well. And I'm going to say that it is not easy. And in the last few weeks, I have been really stuck as well again in the achieving. And I thought about pushing this episode out until I'm in the being. But then I realized this is a lot more authentic. This is where you can probably relate to me a lot more because I'm going through this too. I'm going to close with telling you it is not about exiting hustle mode forever. It's not about being perfect. I explained to you that right now, as I'm recording this, I'm just coming out of an extreme hustle mode launch phase of work. So I understand that it's not always possible. Thinking, where does this need to perform and achieve come from? What are the actions I'm doing that are making it happen all the time? And how can I start to calm that down? And I really would love to hear what you are doing as well. So if you want to leave a comment review talking about what are you going to focus on for your relaxation, for your getting back to being, could also send me a message on Instagram at It's Sade. I would love to hear what is working for you in this. What do you want to try? What are you struggling with? And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, for being here, and for being open.